And we welcome you to another edition of the Double A Team. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. We thank you for joining on another edition of the program. I am solo tonight. Ken is off for personal reasons. He will be back in 2 weeks, so we really appreciate you joining us. I'm going solo tonight, so thank you so much for joining us. Our guest tonight is Austin Gayle from Pro Football Focus. We're going to be covering the NFL draft, particularly the Bears. Obviously, next Thursday will be the NFL draft. The Bears don't have a first-round pick, so we'll have to wait until day 2 for the Bears to make a pick, unless they decided to move back into the first round, which would be somewhat of a controversial decision considering the amount of draft picks that the Bears have given up under Ryan Pace. And now this is where the Bears find themselves right now, strapped for cap, which is no longer the case. But, we only have 6 draft picks to work with. So I expect some heavy trade downs just to get some few picks in the 3rd and the 4th round. But we'll see where Ryan Poles and the entire front office. I'm sure they have done their homework, but the real test will be come next Thursday, where they will be put to test with their football acumen and everything. But I'm going to start off, obviously, leading up to the Austin's appearance momentarily. For anybody who lives in Chicago and listen to the sports radio, whether it's 670 The Score or ESPN 1000, there was a appearance by Mike Florio, who many of you know from NBC Football Night in America and the main writer from Pro Football Talk. He went on, I believe, Mullion Haw Wednesday, and obviously we don't have the clip to play, but he basically stated that the way Ryan Poles have positioned this offseason with the moves and everything, they're just basically giving up or don't have any faith in Justin Fields, which I find that a really, really preposterous. If you can go to the Odyssey app and Google 670 The Score, Mullion Haw, just listen to that and it will probably make your blood boil by listening. And then Friday or Saturday, Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated posted an article. I'm sure you might have seen this on Twitter if you have a Twitter handle yourself. Justin Fields is why NFL needs a transfer portal, like a college transfer portal, which we won't, divulge into the article as itself. But basically, he's saying that, Justin Fields shouldn't be criticized for asking trade like as if it's a transfer portal. Judging from the headlines. And first of all, it's so shocking that the media nowadays post something so egregious, for clicks and likes. So it is just the world we live in, unfortunately. We know people like Skip Bayless and Stephen A's of the world going on a morning show in their respective networks, ranting and saying outrageous stuff just to get riled up from many people, and that's just the world's that's just the media cycle that we live in, unfortunately. And also the perception of the Chicago Bears certainly doesn't help, and there is a validity to it, and I get it, why these people put up an article or go on shows and make some outrageous stuff like that. And I'm not accusing them of making some stuff up or they can see into the future, but like I said, Ryan Poles and the Bears have their works cut out. Next Thursday, they are going to be put to the test. For 3 months since they took over the job, they had to work their ass off. Their scouts had to review every tape, go over their reports and everything. So now that their work, their labor of work, will now be put to test. Look, not everybody's going to be happy about some of the players that the Bears get, regardless of whether they trade up or trade down. But whoever they get, we'll make a decision on it. Maybe we'll come back to the show 2 weeks from now and maybe touch on, whether the players that we got really make any sense or are going to make any impact. So I am willing to put these articles aside finally once and for all and just wait for the next week finally to come so that we can finally move on and then get a better idea where the Chicago Bears are now, once and for all. All right, so joining us now from Pro Football Focus, PFF, Director of Content, Austin Gayle is joining us. Austin, thank you so much. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Austin. We really appreciate it on short notice. Austin, you're part of the media, right? You're part of the media. I just touched on what the people like the Florials and Connor Orrs of the world are saying regarding the Bears. Obviously, the perception is the reality. The Bears suck. There's no question about it. It's where the receivers go to die. Quarterbacks are never developed. We're still talking about Sid Luckman's on television every year. When there's a national broadcast and all of that. When you see articles or headlines like that, where do you stand on the Justin Fields potential, and do you see him reaching that with the Bears?
I do think that Justin Fields has been put in a really difficult position due to a lot of short-term decision-making by, the Bears, right? You look at them trading up big for Justin Fields. That's Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. And then in the second round, they trade up big for Tevin Jenkins, the Oklahoma State offensive tackle. And that has really lost a lot of resource, right? They've gave up a lot of resource to make those two selections. It hasn't immediately panned out. And now you lose Allen Robinson in an offseason, you lose Khalil Mack in an offseason, and you could argue that the team hasn't got significantly better over the course of the last 6 months. And that's super concerning. And now he has a new coaching staff and there's a new offense coordinator, and all that stuff kind of comes into place for just inconsistent approach in development. And that's roster development and that's Fields development as well. I don't think he's been put in a really good position to take the next step. So much is going to be put on him to improve by himself. The offensive line is not vastly improved. The receiving core takes a step back without Allen Robinson. It's going to be very difficult for him to kind of take this next step. I do think the Bears are put in a bad place. I don't think that's anything against Fields, right? What it is more against is just some of the short-term decision-making by the previous staff.
That is true. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy's short-sightedness have really costed the Bears, from a cap standpoint and draft picks. We only have 6 picks to work with. By the way, if you have any questions geared to Austin, whether it's Bears or any other teams for that matter, although we're collecting questions, so feel free to shoot them on the comments section. With the 6 picks that the Bears have to work right now, obviously the Bears need in no particular order are receivers, offensive linemen, and cornerbacks in no particular order right now. If you had to pick with the 39 and 48 in the second round, provided that they don't make any moves, how do you see the Bears, filling those 2 positions or 3 positions that I just mentioned?
Yeah, I think some receivers that could be available at that 39 spot, right? Or Sky Moore, Western Michigan, who I'm super high on, but I don't think the
Mhm.
league will see him as maybe a top 35 pick. I think the other receiver that makes sense is Jahan Dotson of Penn State. And I think it's really important that they do attack the offensive side of the ball, right? Because like it's less important that they win football games this year as much as it is important for them to develop Justin Fields and give him weapons. Is Justin Ross going to be available? Jalen Tolbert, South Alabama, Christian Watson, North Dakota State, Alec Pierce, Cincinnati. Like I wouldn't even hate at 39 and 48 them double dipping on the offensive side of the ball, going wide receiver and then potentially interior offensive line. I think you could maybe grab Darian Kennard, who played tackle at Kentucky, but likely slots into guard at the next level and probably produces early on. Dylan Parham of Memphis is another name that comes to mind in terms of an interior offensive lineman that could come in and start pretty early. I think it's important that they allocate a lot of their draft capital to the offense, less so prioritizing maybe holes they have on defense and more so prioritizing like, hey, let's actually give Justin Fields a fair shake.
Mm-hmm. The name George Pickens from Georgia is a very popular name among the the draftniks, and even in this chat room, we have a different shows that cover the NFL draft. Uh, um, we joke that Ryan Pace used to like the Georgia guys, and he leaves and he's somebody that George Pickens is a popular name, like I said, but he's had some injury histories, and he had some discipline issue where I remember he got kicked out of a team or got penalized for throwing a water bottle at a player in one of the games, I believe Tennessee a couple of years ago. Where do you stand on George Pickens?
I'm a huge fan of his game. I think he's one of the best. He has easily the best hands in the draft. I think he's a very sure-handed wide receiver that teams will covet him for how he attacks the vertical route tree. That's the hitch, the comeback, and the go ball. And I think those are some of the more valuable routes. It's very similar to the route tree that Denzel Mims ran coming out of Baylor or DK Metcalf coming out of Ole Miss. And the concern is I think he goes a lot higher than that 39th pick. I think there's a really good chance that the Chiefs target him at the back end of the first round, or the Green Bay Packers target him at the back end of the first round, because he's got really good size for the position and has won as an outside receiver in the SEC. So I don't know if he will be available for the Bears in the second round, but if he is, that's a name I really do like, and I like him ahead of Jahan Dotson. I like him ahead of Jalen Tolbert and Justin Ross on the back end.
You mentioned Dotson and Sky Moore. Now, both are kind of a sub 6 foot receiver, and the Bears already have that with Darnell Mooney. Is there any problems putting two receivers or three of them, let's just say double dipping, and you have three receivers or two or three receivers who are like 6 foot or sub? You don't see any concerns because they're both, have a different skill sets.
I think it would be a little concerning, say they went Dotson, Moore, and then you have Mooney. I think that is a very small receiving core, but Mooney is a vertical stretcher, right? Really, really good speed for the position, and they want him to win down the football field. Whereas Sky Moore, I think, can do it all. I think he's one of the more versatile receiving prospects in this class. I think he can win the deep, short, and intermediate levels of the football field, and they honestly are going to need a separator, right? They need a guy that can create separation at the release point and at the stem, and you don't have that in Mooney, in my opinion. You don't have that in the other receivers in this class. Like, I don't think they can afford to attack certain skill sets as much as they need guys that could get open. And I think Sky Moore, of any of the receivers that could be available in that spot, I think he's one of the best available.
Okay. There are a couple of receivers that are also that needs to be mentioned. Christian Watson, North Dakota State. Is he going in the first round, in your opinion?
I don't think he ultimately does. I like him a lot. I think he's obviously got really good size for the position. You have to bet on his trajectory as well. I talked to North Dakota State head coach Matt Entz, and he spoke so much to how much he's improved over the course of his career at North Dakota State. He was elected as a captain this past season. The issues I have are his ball skills. Like, I still think he's really developing as a guy that can catch the football in traffic, catch the football even when open. He just doesn't attack the ball that well, but frame and speed and athleticism can make up for a lot of that, right? And I think that ultimately will benefit him in the NFL. Will he have to learn the nuances of the position and improve his hands? Sure. Even Coach Matt Entz told me that. I asked him, what's the biggest area Watson needs to improve? He said hands. He just attack the ball better, work the jugs machine. That's what's ultimately going to help him last in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. The other popular name that is being mentioned in the mock drafts for the Bears is Alec Pierce of Cincinnati. He's a local kid from the Illinois area. Tell us about what you think of him, and do you think spending a second round on him is a bit of a reach, or or
I
no?
don't know necessarily. I mean, maybe a little bit, right? I think there's some concerns with like how much of the route tree he can run, but he's a big
Mhm.
bodied, athletic, explosive receiver. I honestly like Alec Pierce more than Christian Watson. I think he's offers a very similar skill set, and you're going to ask him to do a lot of the same things, but
Mhm.
already has better ball skills. And you saw that like how often Ritter went after him in the red zone in high leverage situations, critical situations. He just explodes at the line of scrimmage and wins that vertical route. And I think he's got way better ball skills than what Christian Watson has, and that's just going to show up in the league, right? And that's what's going to earn him targets early in his career.
Mhm. What under the radar receivers do you think that the Bears could draft that would fit their system? That could be like a contributor that many people are not maybe paying attention or sleeping on.
I'm still a big fan of Jalen Tolbert, the South Alabama wide receiver. I think he was one of the more
Mhm.
impressive wide receivers at the Senior Bowl. He's a local kid. He's from Mobile, Alabama. And I think he has good athleticism, not great athleticism, but he attacks the ball well, really productive in college. I also really like the Rutgers receiver, Bo Melton, who is probably a slot only in the NFL, but really good speed, former 4-star recruit. He's from the New Jersey area, had offers to go to Michigan and some of these other bigger receivers or bigger classes, bigger schools, and decides to stay in Jersey, stay at Rutgers. And like that was really, it shows just like he's a bigger prospect than maybe what Rutgers normally gets. And Justin Ross is another one too, who we were banking on a little bit of what he did his true freshman season.
Right.
But I think Justin Ross, if he can like get back to where he was, another really good hands catcher, contested guy that I think this receiving class is very deep, and I think you could benefit from a lot of guys that will be available round 2, round 3.
All right, let's go to the offensive line. The Bears invested finally, like you said earlier, moving up to get Jenkins. And then, they drafted Larry Borum, who the Bears fans are somewhat split. They hear so much about, Borum is a swing tackle. He's not a left tackle, blah, blah, blah. Where do you see either one of them playing, and what's their natural position in your opinion?
And you mentioned Tevin Jenkins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
And
think
Larry Borum. I'm sorry.
Borum probably kicks inside, but he's got enough size to play outside. Jenkins, I think, needs to stick out at right tackle. I mean, I think the biggest thing for him, he's just got to stay healthy, and back injuries linger. That's always the concern with back injuries. And if he can get back healthy, I think he was, good enough at Oklahoma State and good enough prospect where I want to continue to try him at right tackle. For Borum, I never liked the foot speed coming out of Missouri. And I think I'd rather see him in a phone booth so he doesn't get beat up by, speed along the edge. So that guy, Borum's probably going to stick inside. And then Jenkins, you just have to hope that, making that investment, he could stick out at right tackle.
Okay, if that's the case, give us a couple of tackles, who can play left tackle that the Bears could draft at 39 or 48.
It'll be difficult, right? I mean, it's a position that the league covets. Offensive tackle, you rarely see like legitimate starters entering day 2. But if I had to give one name, I think it would be Abraham Lucas. And I talked to a lot of evaluators in the league and even a reporter here at PFF, Doug High, and they say, don't be surprised if Abraham Lucas goes in the first round. He's got really good traits for the position, a ton of experience playing left tackle in the Pac-12, and he's done it in the Mike Leach offense where they throw the football 1,000 times. And he is right now, I think, inside the top 50 on PFF's draft board. I think he goes higher than that at 39. Abraham Lucas, I think you can immediately slot in as a left tackle. And is he going to have like be an elite player out of the gate? No, but I think he'll be a serviceable one that is way well worth the bet at pick 39, or even if he's available at 48.
The other offensive tackle names that I see on the the mock drafts, Central Michigan's Bernard Ryman. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Mm-hmm. What do you like about him? What's his strength? What's his weakness? Do you see him as being a good fit for the Bears?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think Mike is a huge fan of Bernard Ryman. Mike is my podcast co-host and the lead draft analyst here at PFF. Huge fan of his. He's obviously the Austrian-born monster that went to Central Michigan, had a lot of success playing tackle. I think he was a former tight end converted tackle. Short arms for the tackle position, but he still clears the 33-inch threshold that a lot of teams covet at the tackle position. So if Ryman's available on day 2, I think that's a huge win. Tyler Smith is getting moved up and draft boards, the Tulsa offensive tackle. But that's another one. If he's available on day 2, I'm springing the card in for Tyler Smith at 39. The more I talk about it, and specifically speaking to the Bears' needs, there could be some legitimate talent there. But I just know how much the league covets offensive tackle, and it's why Tyler Smith is getting rumored as a first rounder. Abraham Lucas is getting rumored as a first rounder. Bernard Ryman could sneak in at the back end. Like a lot of these guys, if you think they could start early on and feel like they have favorable projectable careers, just considering the positional value, that tackle position is just going to get vaulted up to a point where guys that maybe would be available day two are going to go up into the first round.
Mm-hmm. Is Trevor Penning too far of a player for the Bears to reach?
I think for me, I'm not as high on Trevor Penning as the league is, but from all that I've heard, I think he could go as high as 17 to the Chargers, or even maybe inside the top 10. He's been mocked that high as well. He's just like a rare athlete, and a lot of teams bet on the uncoachable traits he has. One is athleticism, two is size, and then he also is just like a nasty demeanor that a lot of offensive line coaches, flock to. When you talk to evaluators in the NFL, they see demeanor, that mean streak, as something that's uncoachable. Like you can't get that out of a player in the NFL. He's got to have it on the inside, and I think that's a lot of teams will cover that when they are evaluating offensive tackle prospects.
Mm-hmm. But talking about the interior linemen for the Bears, I know a lot of Bears fans are, early on thought about Tyler Lindenbaum and, Zion Johnson being available. But obviously, I have a strong feeling that both will be probably mid to late first round picks. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, I don't know if Linderbaum will be available on day two, but there are a lot of interior offensive linemen I like on day two. I think Luke Gadecki, who's the other offensive tackle from Central Michigan, shorter arms, probably gets kicked inside the guard. He was on my podcast recently, super smart player. I think he's going to be a guy that comes in and has a lot of success early on. He's a strong-willed dude that I think wants to win at the next level. I think the other guy, too, I like is Cole Strange at Chattanooga. Thinner lower half than what you're looking for, but explosive dude that I think teams will cover there as well. Luke Fortner of Kentucky is another one. Ed Ingram, LSU. I do think, there's this class specifically is really good in terms of day two depth at interior offensive line, off-ball linebacker, and safety. And for teams that are looking for starters at any of those three positions, I don't think you need to be picking in the first round to go get them. So I think the Bears are in a fortunate spot if they're looking at any of those positions, especially interior offensive line.
That's good to know. Okay, let's switch to the secondary, the corner position. Roger McCreary's name has been pretty popular amongst the the people within our network. Where do you see him? And does his short arm, like a 28-inch, I'm reading, is that of a major concern to you, or is that just of a all talk and nothing else?
It's definitely a concern, right? There's very few cornerbacks in the NFL with sub 30-inch arms that stick it on the outside. And they have to, a lot of the ones that do, Dante Jackson of Carolina, among others, like they legitimately have to burn. Like they have to have really good speed to make up for some of that lackluster length. And I think what ultimately happens is Roger McCreary goes on day two to a defense that wants to play a lot of man coverage and is willing to kind of stick him in the slot. And I think he wants to do whatever he can in the NFL. I was talking with the Senior Bowl and they were asking him to play zone coverage. He's like, yeah, I've never done it before, but I'll do it. I think a team that runs a lot of man coverage and is looking for like a heady slot player, I think that's where Roger McCreary ultimately goes. And is that concerning, right? Do you want your cornerbacks to have longer length and have more like inside-outside versatility? Sure. But in terms of a day two pick, someone who's super productive in the SEC, I'm a big fan of McCreary's game on day two.
Okay. Let's see. Another popular name are Kyler Gordon and Trent McDuffie, both, I believe, from Washington. If you had to pick one, if both are still available for the Bears, which one would you pick and why?
I'm a huge Trent McDuffie fan. I think Trent McDuffie is ultimately a first rounder, and Kyler Gordon can fit into that as well. Two guys also with concerning arm length, though. They have great athleticism. They're smooth movers, explosive in and out of their stance, but you're probably going to want to play them into a zone scheme, right? You're not going to ask them to play a lot of man coverage, press man, and all that kind of stuff. You're going to need them in, too high, cover two, cover four type of looks where you're not asking them to bully line of wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. I think McDuffie ultimately is, a first round talent, and Kyler Gordon maybe sneaks into the back end, but I'm leaning McDuffie or Gordon, even though both are really productive players coming out of the University of Washington and very good athletes as well.
What about Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson? I know he had a hernia. Is that a concern, or is that something that doesn't concern you long term at all?
Yeah, the injury concern is always going to pop up with Booth. Like, you just wanted to see more from him, but he's one of my favorite players in this class. Honestly, I think he's vastly underrated. I have him as a top 20 player, and I see a lot of mock drafts that have him falling to the Bengals at 31, or other teams in the 20s. I think the Philadelphia Eagles should be considering him at 16. Right? I think he's that good of a player, and really good in man coverage, physical guy, wants to tackle. I don't know why why there's this viewed as big of a gap between Stingley and Sauce to Booth. I think Booth could be a lot closer than people think. I don't think this is wide gap that we're seeing a lot of mock drafts.
Mm-hmm. Is Alfie Goodrich, his teammate, a better player than Booth?
I would argue Booth's better. I'm a big Booth fan. I think he is a better prospect, better athlete across the board.
Okay, good. The other underrated need for the Bears is probably a three technique. Akeem Hicks is probably not going to be coming back at all. The Bears signed Larry Ogunjobi. They had to, cancel the contract because of the foot issue that plagued them. What players would be a good fit for that position, in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's not a great draft if you're looking for day 2, day 3 techs. If I had to highlight one, maybe it's Matthew Butler of Tennessee, Perion Winfrey, Oklahoma, but it's a better Logan Hall if he falls that far, I think is an option. But there is some bigger bullies that can help two gap at the next level. Travis Jones of UConn, I really, Fedarian Mathis, you go Tito Obanaya, Marquand, Bully Ball McCall is what they call him. I think there's a lot of big run stuffing defensive tackles, Neil Farrell Jr. of LSU, that if you're looking for guys that won't offer a ton as pass rushers, but can offer a lot as run defenders and free up one-on-ones for other guys, I think that's where you're more looking. But honestly, with the depth of this interior defensive line class, I doubt it's a direction they're taking, especially at 3-tech.
One of the positions that I've always, probably myself included, some of the Bears fans have had concerns is the safety position. Eddie Jackson regressed pretty badly since he got the big contract. We still haven't figured out a way to replace Adrian Amos. What safety, there are a couple of guys that I'm very interested in, Kirby Joseph from Illinois, being an Illinois fan. Tell us about Kirby Joseph and his fit for the Bears.
Long arm safety prospect. I think best fits probably in the box somewhere. I don't love him at deep safety. I don't love his COD and explosiveness, but I think in the box, I think he's got the arm length to stick it up against tackles. He's also got good ball skills. I think he tacks the ball well and will get his hand on the football. I think my favorite of the day 2, day 3 safeties, probably after Lewis Seen, Jaquan Brisker, is Nick Cross. Nick Cross, insane range coming out of Maryland. I think he also is more physical than people are letting on. I like Nick Cross a lot. Brian Cook of Cincinnati is a really physical player that is going to get dragged down draft boards because he was too hurt to be, a big part of the pre-draft process. And probably a little bit further down, if I had to highlight maybe a flyer, is Tyson Anderson, the safety out of Toledo, who I think has really good athleticism and speed as well. That project player, you're not going to ask to start right out of the gate, but someone with enough tools to maybe project into a developmental role.
Mm-hmm. The linebacker position is somewhat of a need, obviously. Danny Trevathan, a June 1st cut. The Bears added, Nick Morrow. You pair with that with Roquan Smith. What linebackers do you see the Bears could be looking at and maybe fitting that position of need, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think 2 come to mind immediately, or maybe 3. I like Brian Asamoah of Oklahoma, if available, could be an option for them. I think he's a super athletic player that they're going to look for. Chad Muma of Wyoming, I think, is a very heady linebacker prospect that probably plays the best linebacker of any of the position, any of those guys that will be available after Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd, but isn't the same athlete as some of these other ones. And probably the other one to name is Troy Anderson. Played running back his freshman year at Montana State. Then he played quarterback, and then finally got the opportunity to play linebacker this past season. And one of the most athletic off-ball linebacker prospects in this class. I think any 3 of those guys would be options for them on day 2, day 3.
Mm-hmm. Somebody mentioned Stephen Weatherford, I believe, from Miami of Ohio. Is he more of a linebacker, or is he more of a safety?
Definitely more of a linebacker. I don't love his speed. I know he's tested better than I maybe thought, but on tape, he just doesn't look as explosive and as swift as you want from the position. I know he played more safety at Miami of Ohio, but really concerning when you could stack him up against some of the other, actual linebacker prospects in this class. I'm not as big on Weatherford, and I don't think he had that good of a Senior Bowl, to be honest. I wanted him to pop off the tape a little bit more in Mobile. I'd rather lean into some of the other guys that'll be available.
All right, so we're going to switch a little bit of a subject here and look at the draft overall as a whole. Um, let's talk about the other NFC North teams: Detroit, Green Bay, and Minnesota. What do you see them doing in the draft this year?
Detroit, I think, is going to lock into an edge at number 2 overall, whether that's Aiden Hutchinson, Trayvon Walker, or Kayvon Thibodeau. I think they're going to go one of those 3 guys. And at 32, I honestly think they still might consider quarterback. I think they could go Sam Howell, Matt Corral, whoever it may be at 32, just maintain 5 years of control, rookie contract, and take a flyer on just one of the guys that they maybe like in this class. For Green Bay, I don't hate the idea of them double dipping at receiver or going receiver offensive line. I think some of my favorite drafts have been Bernard Ryman, Central Michigan, and then maybe they grab Traylon Burks or Sky Moore and Tyler Smith of Tulsa. I think they go double dip on offense there, one offensive lineman, one wide receiver. And for Minnesota, it's got to be one of the corners, right? If Derek Stingley's there, they take him. If Ahmad Garner's there, they take him. And I think one of those 2 players should be available to the Minnesota Vikings at 12. And that they're going to get a really good football player regardless of who they snag if it's between those 2 corners.
Obviously, the quarterbacks class of this year is pale in comparison to the year before. You mentioned Detroit taking a quarterback at 32. Is there anybody do you see being taken before that, or is this obviously not a year to pony up or move up to get a quarterback? But what do you see in this year's quarterbacks class?
I think at least 3 come off the board in the first round. I do think that Malik Willis comes off the board at some point. But people betting on his upside, his arm talent, his athleticism. I think Kenny Pickett has enough fans for where he's going to go inside the first round as well. And then one of Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell, Matt Corral is going to be this other quarterback that comes off the board too. I don't know which one will be. I think the league's probably highest of those 3 on Ridder, and I'm the highest on Ridder as well. He's my QB1 in this class, but Willis is just too talented to go outside the first 32. And I think Pickett has enough fans of his accuracy and just how good he was at Pittsburgh this past year that I think he'll be another one that goes in the first round as well.
Would Carolina pick it at 7, as has been rumored to be, because Matt Rule recruited him to come to Temple before he left for Baylor?
I think so. I think the betting markets are smart to have, Kenny Pickett being a Carolina Panther at plus 150, which is really low for a team picking all the way down at 6. I think that where there's smoke, there's fire with that one. I think if Kenny Pickett's available at 6, the Carolina Panthers will strongly consider drafting him in that spot.
Mm-hmm. The number 1 pick overall is Jacksonville. Is Marvin Neal the consensus number 1 as somebody to protect Trevor Lawrence long term, or do they go edge like Thibodeau or Hutchinson, whoever it is, or even Walker for that matter?
Yeah, I think the betting odds right now have it as Aiden Hutchinson's the favorite to go number 1 overall, and that's kind of been the case ever since they franchise tagged Cam Robinson. Cam Robinson played left tackle for them last year. I don't think it's still. I still think it's an option for them to go offensive line, right? I think they could go get Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, Charles Cross at number 1 overall if they wanted to. But I think they're ultimately going to go edge, and it's going to be either Trayvon Walker of Georgia, betting on just freakish athleticism and size and upside, or Aiden Hutchinson, who I think has a much higher floor in the NFL, floor pass rushing production at least, and that ultimately could draw them to Aiden. But I think it's one of those 2, Walker or Aiden, that goes number 1 overall.
Okay, since my co-host Ken Feng is off tonight, he's a Browns fan. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Browns gave away so much to get Deshaun Watson. What do you see the Browns doing with whatever the picks that they have in this year's draft?
I think it's going to be very difficult for them to add talent, right? Because they don't have a lot of capital in this year's draft now after obviously trading as much as they have. I think their first pick in the draft is 44th overall. They don't have a lot of holes, though. I mean, if Deshaun Watson's able to play early on, I think it's going to be a team that's going to be able to compete in the playoffs, right? They have picks 44, 78, and 99 inside the top 100. If they had needs, it's receiver. They could be looking at wide receiver. I think Jahan Dotson, same names that kind of come up for the Bears, right? Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore, Christian Watson, Alec Pierce. They could go after one of those types. And I think they also have needs along the defensive line. And that could be interior defensive line or even edge. And I don't think it's a bad idea for them to trade back, right? If they want to trade back and allocate more picks and pick up more rookie contracts, as they know their cap's going to get a lot hotter with Deshaun Watson, I think that'll be very difficult as well.
Okay. Olave and Wilson are obviously the top two receivers, both from Ohio State. I know a lot of Bears fans are, we're hoping that one of them would drop, but obviously that is no longer the case right now. Which is a better prospect right now, and why?
I'm a huge Chris Olave fan. And I think a lot of people would have Garrett Wilson as the number one wide receiver, and rightly so. And he's more dynamic, better after the catch, more sudden with his movements. But Chris Olave, hyper efficient feet, a guy that I think wins the valuable routes, can win downfield. The only reason I wouldn't have him as a wide receiver one, the wide receiver one in this class, he just doesn't offer anything after the catch. He's very similar to Calvin Ridley's profile in that way, where Calvin Ridley just wins down the football field, the deep comeback, the deep post, and all that stuff, and isn't someone that's going to break a ton of tackles or make people miss after the catch and gain yards that direction. But as long as you're winning down the field and winning on a high average depth of target, you don't need yak ability, right? You don't need yak ability to succeed. So I like Olave over Wilson, but it's still pretty close.
Okay, fair enough. And then finally, let's talk about the Giants. The Bears have the Bears pick. They have 2 picks within the top 7 right now. They're starting over like the Bears are with new GM and the head coach. What do you see the Giants doing with those 2 picks?
I think the best case scenario for the Giants is to probably go either is edge and offensive tackle. At number 5, if they can get one of Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, or Charles Cross, and then at 7, if you have George Karlaftis, Trayvon Walker, or Kayvon Thibodeau available, I think that's the other selection, right? I think double dipping in the trenches, going offensive tackle and edge is the best case scenario. If they don't do that, I think maybe going corner then. If they can get Ahmad Gardner with one of those picks. And then also, because I know that James Bradbury's tenure there in New York might be short-lived. I think they're looking to get out of that contract. If they want to go corner and offensive tackle or corner and edge, I think that's another option too. But picking at 5 and 7, man, it's going to be hard to screw up. I think that's the best, one or two of the best places to be picking in this draft. Like number 1 overall, there isn't, I think there's reason for them to want to trade down because there's a lot of talent in that same like tier up top.
Mm-hmm. So let's start taking some questions here. Okay, so we have the Bears obviously needing a punter. Your thoughts on Matt Araiza, I believe, from San Diego State. What do you think of him?
Yes, he's a phenomenal deep punter. I think he's a guy that can really light it up 80 yards down the field. I think that's why he's been so highlighted at San Diego State. I do think that he's had the luxury of not needing to like coffin corner a ton of things and like stick things inside the 10. I think Jordan Stout of Penn State is another really, really talented punter prospect that is more of a controlled punter than just an absolute, like weapon in terms of just like lighting it up from like deep in the 20. And then the other guy I would highlight too is Ryan Stonehouse, who has a really good leg, is a little bit more compact compared to what, teams look for at the punter position. Teams want long, tall, long leg guys, and he's a little bit shorter, but still is an absolute cannon of a leg. And I think he'll be coveted as well. Okay.
So Bears could probably pick 6th or 7th on a punter in the names that you just mentioned, and they'd probably be better off with it.
Oh, absolutely. I do think that this punter class is pretty solid, so much that maybe you can get some guys in the 7th round or even undrafted free agents that'll, at least be camp legs to start.
Mm-hmm. Jerome with a question. Why can't Jenkins play left tackle? That's actually a good question. He played both positions, obviously. Is it because of his back, or is there more to it?
I don't think it's so much that he can't play left tackle. I think it's just you're going to be asking him to do a different thing than he did at Oklahoma State, and like it's just like it's hard to flip a player's footwork, and it's never something you can't do. But you talk to people who've played the offensive line a long time in the NFL, or guys who've coached offensive linemen. It's so much easier said than done. Flipping a guy's footwork. Is it possible for Jenkins? Absolutely. I don't think anything is impossible for the athletes in the NFL, but I think he's going to be much more comfortable playing the same position. Obviously, he played a ton of at Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jordan with a question. Let's hear your Kyle Hamilton take. Are you top 5 generational talent high, or is he Isaiah Simmons 2.0? His name has been, pretty popular, and I know there were some outrage when somebody put him at number 3 with the Jets early on or something. Where do you stand on Kyle Hamilton?
Yeah, I don't think, generational talent is tough, right? I think he did not test as a generational talent. There's definitely concerns there. And I still feel that he's a top 15 talent in this class. And that's probably the range I feel really good about taking him, that 10 to 15, 10 to 16 range, because of low positional value at safety, and also like just did not test in the same tier as Derwin James and other guys that we've really coveted at the safety position. But I do think that you can play any scheme you want. You talk to Coach Brian Kelly, who obviously is now coaching at LSU, but coached Cal Hamilton before. He said he's the most versatile player I've ever coached. And like you see a lot of that versatility on defense. I think he's going to be a guy that you can ask to do a lot of things. And in a league where the safety position is getting increasingly valued, it's four guys that can play the deep half, can also play the deep third, come down into the box. And I think Kyle Hamilton can do all those things.
All right. Let's have some next question. Austin, who will drop in round 2, and who do you think the Bears should target realistically?
I think we were hitting the nail on the head earlier, Stephen, in that, you can attack early on the receiving class that should be available: Sky Moore, Christian Watson, Alec Pierce, but then also look at interior offensive line and linebacker. Go grab, Leah Chanel if he falls that far. Go grab, Christian Harris of Alabama, Brandon Smith, Penn State, and then interior offensive line: Darian Kennard, Dylan Parham, Cole Strange. Like, you can go get starters at interior offensive line and linebacker at the top of day 2. And then also I think if you're scraping the bottom of that wide receiver class, there's still going to be a lot of high end talent available in that 39 to 40 range.
Do you think they should trade down if the offers are available?
I think so. I think you advocate for trading down anytime you're a roster that doesn't have obvious holes and isn't in a window, right? You could say they're in a window right now because Justin Fields is on a rookie contract, but until that roster improves, you're not going to be in a window.
Okay. Let's go to the next question. Is this draft class worth trading 2023 picks to tap into? I mentioned about earlier, maybe the Bears might move into the latter half of the first round. They might give up a high 2023 first round or even a second round pick. Is it worth it?
I'd probably argue no, right? I don't know if you want to be mortgaging. I don't think the Bears are in any position to mortgage more future draft capital, right? Like, they kind of have to play the cards they're dealt. Play the cards they're dealt, trade back if anything, and try and add more talent on rookie contracts as you start to get out of a little bit of cap hell with the Khalil Mack deal and the Eddie Jackson deal and all that stuff.
All right, let's go to the next question here. Okay. Okay. So this question was already answered. Okay. So this is a non-draft question. Miles Boykin, who was drafted in the 3rd round by the Ravens, I believe 2-3 years ago, he was released today. Obviously, the Bears have a need for receiver. I definitely think he was misused in Baltimore, and I'd like to know what a scout thinks of him then and now.
I definitely think Miles Boykin coming out was viewed very similarly like Christian Watson. Miles Boykin was this big, athletic, fast speedster, but didn't have the ball skills or the production that you really want. Now, I think Watson's a better prospect than what Boykin is, but it's very similar in that he still needs to develop into a high-end receiver. His routes aren't that efficient. He doesn't have a lot of experience being a high target guy. So not surprised the Ravens released him. I think they were more interested in developing some of the other receivers they have on that roster. And for a team that's going to pick him up, it's more about giving him the opportunities, right? Because I just don't think he's going to develop into a polished receiver without the reps.
Mm-hmm. All right, Nomad, thanks for that question. Let's go to the next one. Rank these positions by importance for the Bears, and what should the Bears focus on the second? Corner, receiver, 3 technique, OT, inside the offensive lines. We've mentioned it pretty much. Yeah. Do you put receiver 1 or offensive tackle 2?
I'd probably go receiver and then offensive line, probably bucket offensive tackle and interior offensive line, depending on who's available, right? I think if you have an Abraham Lucas available or Tyler Smith available, guys that are fringe first rounders, maybe Bernard Ryman available, then you go off to tackle. Receiver, I think it's more about, is Pickens there? Is Dotson there? Is Sky Moore there? You can go that direction. And into your offensive line, maybe is more of a day 3 need, because I think there will be some starters available then. The reason I don't maybe prioritize edge is I just don't think there's going to be a lot of talent at that spot. I think linebacker is more of a day 3 option for them, and corner is very similar. Corner, you're not getting a lot outside cornerback talent that can start right away on day 2.
Mm-hmm. Adeptus, thanks for that question. Let's go to the next one, although if you don't mind. Okay, again, Adeptus. For the 5th round pick, which position seems more logical for the Bears to be drafting? Inside linebacker, running back, or strong safety, if there are any good players bringing in?
Probably inside linebacker. I think they could look at some of the guys that are a little bit flawed. Malcolm Rodriguez is one. Mike Rhodes of Iowa State. could be available because they're not like great from a measurables perspective. Running backs always an option on those late day 3 picks if they wanted to grab a complement to David Montgomery. But still, like getting into that round, right? You're rarely getting guys that can contribute on the high end. You're getting guys that are fringe practice squad types that will be lucky to stick around the league. I think it's more important if you're looking to like address needs. You're obviously focusing on like top 100 picks.
We brought up running backs. Your thoughts on David Montgomery? How is he being seen around the league? And if God forbid the Bears decide that they want to trade him for a pick or whatever, or move up or whatever they want to do, is that worth it, or is he still a valuable contributor in your opinion?
Yeah, I do like him a lot. I think I don't know if it is necessary for them to like look for compliments to his skill set. I think the thing that they lack with him is they just don't have like home run speed. Like they want to go, they need to go get someone that can like blow the top off a little bit at the running back position. That's why I don't. When you look at like who they could take, it's some of these guys that are running like low 4.4s, high 4.3 types that like maybe aren't great tackle breakers and early down players. But if you can get someone with some legitimate speed and good enough size to complement, I think that's the direction they should go.
All right, let's go to the next question. Speaking of the running backs that we just mentioned, is James Cook a good chase of pace for Chicago?
I'm a huge James Cook fan. I think James Cook is phenomenal. That's exactly kind of the type of back that they're going to look for, right? A guy that can catch it out of the backfield and complement Montgomery. I think he's not going to be available probably in the 5th. I think it's more likely he's a day 2 guy, but I like James Cook a lot. Obviously, Dalvin Cook's brother.
Right. Thanks for mentioning that. All right, next go to the next question. Obviously, we touched on the quarterbacks. Any of them worth where they will be drafted? Kenny Pickett at 7. Malik Willis at maybe 28 to 32 range. You like the redder kid from Cincinnati. Is that pretty much the top 3 that you see them going in the first round, and if they're worth where they're being drafted?
Yeah, I do think ultimately Ritter will be a value where he's drafted. I think Howell will be a value where he's drafted.
Yes.
I don't know necessarily if Willis will be, right. I don't know if even Pickett will be. Like it's because they're going to get overdrafted. I mean, it's a league that desperately needs quarterback. And I do think that there's bigger conversation to be had about how much the league has like a developmental problem at the quarterback position. And it's, with rookie quarterbacks now playing on rookie contracts, teams are more often looking to rapidly put him in the lineup, right, and maximize that value of a Super Bowl window rather than necessarily bench him behind a guy and all that kind of stuff.
All right, a couple more questions for Austin. Jerome says, I keep hearing Bears are going big and not the skill position. This was obviously former NFL personnel Greg Gabriel, who's on our network, talk about this. Do you agree with that? This is a good possibility with that train of thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a good interior offensive line class. It's a good tackle class. Say they double dipped on the offensive line. You go Abraham Lucas and Dylan Parham, or Abraham Lucas and Darian Kennard, Bernard Ryman and Cole Strange. Like going double dip along the offensive line is, again, you go back to kind of what I was saying earlier. Like it's not super important that the Bears win football games next year. It's more important that they keep Justin Fields upright and develop him as a talent. And I think that's obviously allocating a lot of the resources you have into the offensive line and receiving core.
All right. Don Burr is a Detroit guy who always craps on the Bears. Obviously, Detroit question: how many points will Detroit smoke Chicago? Yeah, in your dreams, Don. But Detroit obviously has the second pick. They can't go wrong with any of the edge rushers out there. Trayvon Walker's a pretty popular guy. I don't know. He really shot up the draft boards. Would any of 3 of them, out of the 3 of them, I should say, who's a better fit?
I think, honestly, the best fit's Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, he's a Detroit guy, staying in Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan guy, yes.
But, if I wasn't going to take Aiden, I'd take Kayvon Thibodeau. I like Thibodeau a lot, too. I think he's a similar tiered prospect in this class. I think he should be in consideration for number 1 overall. I mean, that's how good I think Kayvon Thibodeau is. So I don't think they can necessarily go wrong with any of the edges they take. I think in the order I'd take them is probably Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, and then Trayvon Walker.
All right. The last question. Since the PF is in the Cincinnati area, for those who don't know, downtown Cincy, a gas lamp district, best party scene for you. I know with the Bengals,
Yeah.
going all the way to the Super Bowl. I got a little bit of a glimpse living in Ohio, the parties and the fans going nuts there. Which is your favorite?
I think Jordan is referencing Gaslamp to San Diego. I'm originally from Oakland, California, and then went to San Diego State. But yeah, I definitely go in Gaslamp district. Yeah, but I like downtown Cincinnati. I've made the most of it while I'm here, but I'm going Gaslamp the whole way.
True to yourself. I really, really appreciate it. So let me kind of ask a couple of questions to finish up with the Bears. Do you like what Ryan Poles has done so far, in spite of all the, the Larry Ogunjobi contract fiasco and just going after a bunch of 1-year, prove-it guys, obviously limited. But what do you see in Ryan Poles and the job he has done so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done the best of with what he has, right? Like he's not like entering big long-term contracts that are going to jeopardize the future. He's not trading multiple draft picks to move up in the draft. He's more playing the cards he's been dealt and trying to like reassess the situation, right? Moving on from Khalil Mack and obviously not re-signing Allen Robinson. I think they're embracing more of a rebuild than maybe they wanted to be doing after taking Fields and Tevin Jenkins. But I think these are the necessary steps for them to get back on track.
Excellent point. Listen, Austin, I appreciate you being with us tonight to take all these draft questions. Obviously, you can follow Austin on the Twitter handle you see on the screen. And, Austin, we'd love to have you. Your PFF is obviously, the network that a lot of people go to for the football needs and analytics. Our network, we certainly love to have you and the others, Sam Munson, Mike Renner, you mentioned your podcast colleague, and, for the Bears fans, Brad Spielberger, the cap expert, obviously, that are very, very familiar and follow on their Twitter machine. So we'd love to have you guys on, throughout the season, and, good luck to you guys next week. I'm sure you guys are going to be flooded and so busy. It's kind of like a Super Bowl and Christmas all in one day for you guys. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Steven.
Thank you. We'll keep in touch, and we'd love to have you back on again. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Ellis Hall, since I came here, has been expanded twice, and both times after we were gone, by the way. So we never got it. But I mean, it was tiny.
Do you think that Olin Kreutz would politely ask you to leave the weight room because it was so crowded?
I told you what Olin used to say to me.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
No, and that was at 5:00 when there's no players around.
Olin,
Gayle, get the out of my weight room.
Oh,
and I go.
I think I got a commercial here.
And we welcome you back to the AA team. Stephen Negishi doing solo tonight for Ken Fang, who is off tonight. I want to thank Austin Gayle from PFF for coming on again to take questions. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of questions, and I don't blame them. Next week is the big day for the NFL draft next, and the Bears have a lot of needs that they need to be filled, and hopefully Austin gave you guys some questions regarding the players the positions that the Bears should be targeting, and hopefully. We love to have more PFF people that I mentioned, Mike Renner, Brad Spielberger, Sam Munson, among others, for our show in the coming weeks, and then also leading up to the 2022 NFL season as well. So normally, Ken and I do the show with the opening monologue, but we wanted to focus on the draft because obviously that's next week, and obviously we wanted to spend more time on it. So instead tonight, I'm just going to close out the show with the monologue instead of an opening monologue. We'll do the closing monologue. And baseball season is finally started. Obviously, there's a baseball show coming up at the top of the hour. If you're a White Sox fan, please make sure to follow them. Southside Hitman, I believe, is the name of the show, although I apologize if I messed it up. But there's a baseball show coming up. So if you want to talk White Sox baseball, please give them a follow and follow their show afterwards. Both the White Sox and the Cubs are on the South Burbs Hitman. Thank you so much. Make sure to follow them. They start recording at the top of the hour, talking White Sox and other baseball news as well. Both the White Sox and the Cubs are off to a fairly decent start. I'm a Cubs fan, and Seiya Suzuki is off to a pretty good start. And I never expected him to obviously get off this on a hot streak. He won the NL Player of the Week. He batted almost 400 and had 4 home runs. So obviously that was a terrific, terrific start. I'm a Japanese and I lived in Japan. I followed Japanese baseball fairly when I was living there. Japanese baseball obviously plays while all of us are asleep or just about getting up here in the U.S. Time zone. And, Suzuki certainly has really done his part, hitting 4 home runs. He had a terrific start to the season so far. Obviously, when you think of the Cubs hitters from Japan, the most popular or the least popular name, depending on how you look at it, was Kosuke Fukudome back in 2008. He hit a 3-run home run against the Brewers. That tied a game, and he was really looked like a good player, and he really fizzled. And so far, Suzuki has shown decent power and really shown a nice ability to fend off swinging and be really patient at the plate. Something that if you're Cubs fans like I have been, it drove you crazy with the lack of plate discipline that we saw with the Cubs. As great as the 2016 was, Bryant, Baez, and in some cases, Rizzo certainly didn't have a plate discipline at times, and and the Cubs had a pretty good series, against Colorado. They had, I believe, 15 doubles in the 4-game series. So, will it last? I don't know. Will Suzuki can keep it up? Probably not. But if Suzuki, is the catalyst to the rebuilding for the Chicago Cubs, hey, more power to it. The other guy that I wanted to mention that I don't think none of us, even myself, was not aware of, who's of Asian American descent, is Cleveland Guardians outfielder Stephen Kwan. Yes, it's the Guardians. It's not the Indians. I know still some people say Indians from time to time. He began the year 15 straight plate appearances without striking out. He went on base 15 straight times. Incredible start. For those of you who don't know him, he played at Oregon State, was a 5th-round pick in 2018 draft out of Oregon State. Now, that team was loaded. They won the College World Series. They have so many good major league players who were drafted from that team. And one of the names that I think the Cubs and the White Sox fans are very familiar with is Nick Madrigal, who was their 4th overall, I should say, in that 2018 draft, who, as you know, last year was traded to the Cubs with that Craig Kimbrell trade. And, Madrigal himself is off to a very decent start so far, being a starting second baseman for them. And, Stephen Kwan, from Los Angeles, and, he's off to a very good start. The White Sox and the Guardians are obviously in the AL Central. You're going to see them play 18, 19 times this year. So, you're going to hear his name a lot. And if he can keep it up, he might be a sleeper, rookie of the year pick in the American League. So it's a good start. Obviously Shohei Ohtani, last year and even this year, he had a fantastic start, last year. He got off to a little bit of a rocky start before, he teed off on Texas Rangers pitching, which is easy thing to do over the weekend. He had 3 home runs. So, Ohtani, as long as he stays healthy and put up big numbers like he did last year, he will always be the huge star. But there are Suzuki's and the Kwans of the world who are making names for themselves in the early goings. A lot of people are probably very much disenchanted with the baseball, especially with the work stoppage. That pushed the season back, and I'm sure a lot of people have had enough with the baseball. With the bickering between the players and the owners and stuff like that. So, but at least if you still care about baseball, hopefully you give these two names a follow. The other thing that I also wanted to touch tonight, with Ken off tonight, is the passing of Dwayne Haskins, who was the quarterback of the Ohio State University, the same school that Justin Fields went to after transferring from Georgia. And the controversy, the way he was portrayed, Adam Schefter made a controversial tweet about his struggle. Obviously, was well documented with the Washington football team. He was a bust. He was released in his second year, latched on to the Steelers, was competing for the job with Mason Rudolph and Mitchell Trubisky, and then he got killed. Crossing the highway in Florida where everybody got together to work out, and it was a tragedy. It's unfortunate that this is not the first rodeo for Adam Schefter. He just basically tweets stuff that his agents of players that posted without any consequences or any ideas. Like, for example, when Dalvin Cook was, if you remember, he was being charged for sexual assault and battery with the woman that he was dating at that time, and probably still is. And then recently, Deshaun Watson's sexual harassment trial and dismissal, that did not garner, obviously, a lot of favoritism. And then Gil Brandt, the Hall of Fame executive with the Cowboys. I don't have the audio. If you want to go look at it, Google it. It is probably one of the most egregious and most callous thing you're going to hear. Basically, I do remember Gil Brandt saying that Haskins was living like he was going to be killed eventually, and some really, really stupid stuff. I'm not kidding. He said that on the NFL Network, and then he eventually, within an hour after the outrage, he obviously offered a typical apologies. That a lot of famous people offer nowadays, and it's a sad way to end. And like I said in the beginning, the way Justin Fields is and the Bears were being covered as if Fields wanted to be out is just an S show. And the mainstream media, whether it's sports or politics nowadays, obviously people say and write stuff just to rile up fan bases for clicks and comments. And I remember last year, if I recall, when Marty Schottenheimer, the former NFL great head coach, won everywhere, Cleveland, San Diego, Washington, and Kansas City. Let's not forget. I'm sorry there. I think the obituary on the Washington Post, the obituary writer that took a shot at him because he only lasted, if you remember, one season with the Washington football team because Daniel Snyder ran him out of town after welcoming him. And, I that drew a rebuke. I was so pissed, and like, you had to crap on somebody who just died because of their failures and stuff like that. Obviously, that went away, and I don't know what happened to that writer. Who knows? But we have to understand that the coaches and even the players in this case, they're humans too. Like you said, Nomad, I couldn't agree with you more. They're humans, And we treat them as if just nothing more than a cog in a machine, that they don't do well in the fantasy, fantasy leagues, baseball, basketball, and football. It's just, sometimes we live in a world where we don't look at people like, they don't deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. And I'll be the first one to openly admit I've been angry with certain players and certain teams, the way they do businesses, and the way they conduct themselves. So it's obviously a reminder for all of us, myself included. When Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace drove us crazy last year with the way they conducted themselves in the press conferences, and basically offered us basically nothing but a word salad that we've finally had it. And we all know what happened. His son was a victim of a taunting that was not necessarily, in my opinion. And then George McCaskey went completely off board with the January press conference that I criticized, as if like you had to use Jeff Dickerson's sons to criticize a bunch of high schoolers who criticized and booed Matt Nagy and his son. That was completely outrageous for a man of his age to go off like that. But it's a reminder for all of us, look, to just be better. Next week with the draft, I'm sure there will be a lot of us paying attention. And then certain players obviously may or may not like, you might be yelling and crazy. Hopefully none of us will be punching or throwing stuff on TV and destroy the 50, 60-inch TV that you paid like a pretty good sum money, and having to replace them. But it's a reminder for all of us that we have to all do better. And it's a reminder that there are people out there who will, despite their immense reputation and the prestige and being a legend, people like Gil Brandt, you make some slip ups, and you're forced to offer a cheap apologies, and having to live down and having to tar your reputation. So that's a reminder for all of us. And I honestly think people have become so used to speaking ill, especially in the social media circle of famous people on social media. The behavior carries on when somebody dies. Thankfully, most people still honor the dead, and I couldn't agree more. It's not cool to be dancing on the grave of somebody or someone that of their loved ones as well. And it's a reminder, like I said, for all of us to be better in not just in social media, but in real life as well, where we interact with the people that on a regular basis, whether it's a family member or within your colleagues as well, within your office. All right. Well, listen, I really appreciate all of you for sticking around tonight, for being a solo. Obviously, it's a new experience for me, not having Ken around. It felt kind of weird. I'm sure it felt weird for a lot of you guys as well. But at least we got to speak with Austin, spend a good 45 minutes or so talking exclusively about the NFL draft, and hopefully next week all of us will be happy with the Bears selection and the jobs that Ryan Poles and his staff are doing to help improve the Chicago Bears for this upcoming season. All right, so in 2 weeks, Ken will be back, and we are expected to have former United States men's soccer team captain Eric Winoda on our show. We were supposed to have him this month, but obviously he had the traveling tournaments with his daughter's soccer team and other stuff this past week that we had to push it back. And we're expected to have him next week to talk about what it's like to represent the United States of America in the competitive field. And hopefully, I know a lot of people don't like soccer, and I get it, but I think it will be a fascinating story to hear one of the greatest players to represent this country and all that stuff. My name is Stephen Negishi. Thank you so much for watching the AA team tonight, and thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, start of May 2nd. That is also the AAPI Heritage Month. We're going to be focusing on bringing as many Asian Americans as possible on our show who works in the sports and entertainment field, as well as athletes if possible. I hope you will join us again in 2 weeks from now. We'll talk about the NFL draft if possible. And have a great week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks from now tonight. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.